Now that we are done with logistics, let's get to the exciting part. I'd like to welcome our panelists. Thank you so much, all of you, to take the time to join us today and share your experience. My name is Israel Kondori, and I currently work at Contra Costa College. I've been supporting students through different programs like Metas, Adelante STEM Academy, and other college programs that deal with preparation for students and support for students. Currently, I'm still working at Contra Costa College under the guys of under Mara Padilla, and the STEM department that is transitioning into institutional effectiveness and equity. I've had the pleasure of working with many students, undocumented and otherwise, throughout the past, I want to say 6 years, and it's been a great journey. It's been a lot of work that we've been doing in terms of information, disseminating information, and helping out parents and students become a little bit more familiar with the process from financial aid through enrollment and the questions that come in between. So I definitely very happy that I will be facilitating today's session. Now, in 30 seconds or less, please tell us your name and what brings you to this panel today. So I'm going to start with Myra.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, having a little trouble unmuting. Mayra Padilla, Dean of Institutional Effectiveness and Equity at Contra Costa. I've also been directing the Metas program, which is a preschool to 12th grade academic enrichment program now for over 20 years. I'm raised in Richmond, an immigrant from Mexico, first generation college student, and my passion has always been trying to support our community folks to higher education and to really finding ways to be their glorious, beautiful, brilliant selves. And so I'm excited to be here in support of that goal.
Up next, we have Carlos Armendariz.
Hi, I'm Carlos Armendariz. I'm currently at California State University, Bakersfield. I'm a senior. This is my final year here, and I'm a liberal studies major with the focus in teaching, and I also play here on the men's soccer team. And I'm a first generation college student.
Okay, our next panelist is Beatriz San Juan.
Can you all hear me? Well, yeah, okay, sometimes I have trouble with my headphones. Hi, everyone. My name is Beatriz San Juan. I am a San Jose State College student graduate on our way to applying for a master's degree, but not there yet. I also am a partners manager at Girl Scouts of Northern California. And some of the work I've done even before Girl Scout has been with the immigrant community. Myself, I am a DACA recipient. I've been part of leadership programs and research for our community here in San Jose, particularly East San Jose, I'm most connected with. Some of the work, or in general, the work that I do is oriented towards supporting families and experiencing, not just from like childhood 0 to 5, but also K through 12, and finding the best potential for adults, regardless of the time of their arrival. Some of the work that we do with families is making sure that children get to access their childhood, get to develop skills, but they are able to do it in a family setting. And I'm just here today to be able to share some of the knowledge I have of being here. I was also born in Mexico and raised in San Jose since I was 4 years old. So first generation here in the United States to go to college as well. And yeah, thank you for having me.
Our next panelist is Miguel Molina.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for everybody who's able to join today's session. I hope y'all learn a lot from everybody who's on this awesome panel. My name is Miguel Molina. Currently work for the Richmond Promise, a scholarship program based out of here in Richmond. Born and raised out here in the area, graduated from Richmond High back in the day and UC Davis after. And yeah, I just really want to shed light on a little bit of my journey, and hopefully y'all can get little pieces of it and use it as motivation or as proof that anybody from our community can definitely go to college no matter what the obstacle. And I'll pass it back to you, Israel.
Thank you, Miguel. And last but not least, Blanca Hernandez.
Good evening, everyone. So again, my name is Blanca Hernandez. I am also a West Contra Costa Unified School District alum. I am also a UC Davis alum, and I also went to the Contra Costa Community College District. So, and then I also went to the so I'm like, all my folks are here. So it's really nice to participate in this amazing panel. I'm formerly undocumented, a former DACA recipient, and I actually graduated from high school the year that AB 540 was signed into law. So it's ever since that to, you know, whatever situation a lot of the younger students are in now. It's great to see that that California has come such a long way. I actually left California about 8 years ago, and I am currently saludándolos from El Paso, Texas.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So thank you all for the quick introduction. Now we're going to begin with the questions. And so the screen sharing has now ended, and each panelist, while you guys are speaking, you know, you will be on the spotlight or pinned to the screen, right, while that's happening. So let's get started. First question that we have here for the panel is, how do we give young people the room to be who they need to be? You know, we're talking about field study, location, college, etc. And let's go in the same order that we did this time. So Mayra, let's start with you, and we'll keep going that way.
Yeah. So exposure, I think is super important. Israel was talking about some of the programming that I was able to create with the team of amazingly bright folks from the community. But I think that what is the most critical is young people seeing people that look like them doing the kinds of things that get them excited. And so I don't think that it needs to start at a particular age. With our Metas program, for example, we start with the pollitos. And so we're talking about preschool doing regular literacy, STEM literacy, helping them learn that they can be writers. So for example, in 3rd grade, our pollitos create a book that they illustrate, and it's their own stories, and then we publish it. And then in high school, it's around how do you get involved with math in a way that's interesting and dynamic. And so getting mentors for them, right? And so it really isn't a particular way. It's really trying to enrich a young person's life from every angle, right? Enriching it through their family experience, enriching it through their traditional educational experience, but also having community-based programming, right, that reaches into the community to help them where they are, see themselves in the future. And one of the things that has worked with young folks is speaking to other people that are not as old as I am, but that are, right, college age, college going folks, so that the experience that they're sharing with the youth is relevant and is timely and is engaging them in a way that feels comfortable and in a way that's speaking to the kinds of issues that they're having to deal with immediately. And so for me, again, exposure, having exploration that reaches into their private lives in the community and in their traditional college experience.
Thank you. Carlos, you're next.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Maya was saying. So it's exposure, and then educating them on the things that happen, like that happen during college, letting them know that, like, giving them kind of like a motivation to try to want to attend school, right? It's also what she was mentioning. When I was going through this college process, I really enjoyed being able to talk to someone that was in college, that was experiencing it at the moment. And that's what made me, you know, have that extra push, like, okay, I really want to go to college. Like, it sounds like a place I want to be at. And that's just something that I think is necessary in kids, like in this time right now, that they need someone to look up to, or they just need that little vision that someone is doing something that they could be in the same shoes as them.
Thank you. We're going to the next one, Beatriz.
I would say from a program perspective, how do we make space for students? Some of the work that we do is like asking the student what they want. Most often we give them their year plan and they build it all the way from kinder. We give them options. Do you want to do this or do you want to do that? They choose their badges, they choose their field trip, and they choose like their own like marketing program, right? Or entrepreneurship program. But going outside of program of what I do at work is some of the work that from the student perspective, myself as an immigrant and as a DACA recipient, taking space was recognizing where my community was at, recognizing the spaces that are hurtful, because there is going to be spaces when you go to college, and even recognizing the colleges you choose, like their demographics, the teachers are going to be teaching you, recognizing that it's not like all on you, and that there is hurtful spaces, and knowing like, okay, then this is this space, and this is what I'm taking from that, and this is where I find support. I think for me, finding the group of people that were able to walk me through that I know that they went through similar situations, like for example, what Blanca had mentioned about the AB 540, time. Like my sister was AB 540 recipient. She didn't get the grant. She didn't get the California Dream Act time, and she didn't get the DACA time. But then there was counselors that went through that. There was alumni or like master recipients that I was able to find like that kind of like partnership or in some way mentoring, and being able to see myself and find that space was recognizing that my struggle is a struggle that is shared by other people. And at that same time, I could see that there is hope, and but also validated that what I'm going through is not just me, that the tiredness, the mental situation, like even the stress is not just my own crisis, but it's a whole like crisis of everyone, and seeking that support was like, that's where it starts taking space and not feeling like I'm alone in it. So that's what I would say to students in that sense. It was empowering rather than minimizing, like it's just me and then I just have to overwork myself or continue going. So it helped me pace myself and taking my experience as mine in that way.
Thank you. And up next, Miguel.
I kind of feel like most of the main points have been touched on. So thanks everybody for saying and sharing your thoughts. I would like to look at it from a parent perspective, because I really wish as a student that my parents knew more about the process. So if there's parents on this call, please try to do your due diligence to also understand what the requirements are to go to a university, what the difference between that and a community college is, the price, because a lot of the times first-gen students struggle with going to their parents for support. And even though you might say, échale ganas, you got this, there's things that we just can't tell our parents because they won't understand what a calculus series is, or what a bio or what a workload bio class consists of, and why that doesn't count towards units, right? So I know it's a lot, and I know that parents aren't Superman or Superwoman, but it definitely helps if you can understand your child and realize that maybe it's better for them to go to San Luis Obispo and Cal Poly than to go to UC Merced for a particular program. Or maybe they understand that if they qualify for the Cal grant, there's certain limitations, right, that may constrict that. So they might not be able to receive as much financial aid as their peer. And it doesn't always revolve around grades, because I know that I see that a lot with working with the Richmond Promise. I always have mom and dad say, well, why does my hijo Juan not get as much money as, my neighbor's kid and on that? And I think it's because all of grades, and there's a lot of different factors. So I think we always put a lot of stress on our children, and we expect them to kind of figure it out on their own. But when you look at middle-class families across America, they have that support at home, which is why they're able to, in some cases, make it easier. And us as parents, we can do our own part to try to make sure we make it a little bit easier for our children and not have to feel like they're alone, because that's kind of like how we always feel as first-gen students, especially when you get to a campus that's predominantly white. You kind of start having imposter syndrome and all that. But if your parents got your back and they know their information, it definitely will help a student feel more at ease in troubling times.
Thank you, Miguel. Blanca?
Again, as Megan mentions, I think a lot of the points have been touched on. I think one of the things that I would add to it is that I think at the end of the day, we always equate education to four-year institutions, and that the only like balance to understanding that if we are successful or that we need to be educated means that we need to go to a four-year college. And so I think a lot of the time what I understand as giving young folks the space to figure out who they are and what they need to do. Also as parents, it includes the notion of understanding like there's something beyond college as well, right? Like maybe they don't want to go to a four-year institution. Maybe financial situations doesn't allow for that at the moment. As Megan mentioned, maybe the understanding from both the family, like the parental units and the student just do not also kind of get to the point of comprehending that there's all these things that we need to learn, right? And so like, particularly on a personal basis for me, I was, also a first gen college student. I never had anybody around me to in my immediate family to go ask questions to, so I had to seek that information out myself. And so I think it's important to understand that there's also if a lot of this responsibility is going to end up lying on the student, on the young person, it's a good idea to look at, for example, like degrees that now a community college offers. Like a community college now offers certain bachelor's degrees, or like a nursing program, or there's also trade schools. There's so many other options that can also be looked at. And so in my personal perspective, that also includes allowing a young person to see what their options are, and that is what's providing them the room to see what it is that they want or may want to do.
Thank you. And I think I would like to add in here that there is a lot of there's a good opportunity for parents and for the family around a first generation student to be perhaps a little bit more inquisitive, more curious about their interests, more curious about what they want to do, without being dismissive of it, right? There is plenty of times when somebody comes in and they want to go into a field, that nobody really in the family has ever done before. And they're met with dismissal. Sometimes they're not met with curiosity. People are not asking them, oh, and what attracts you to that major, or what attracts you to that field? We have an opportunity perhaps to understand more of what they want to do, or help them understand that, right? And so we have the opportunity to ask them questions, right? Oh, and why would you want to go into that field, or what can you do with that? We have to understand that it is as much of a learning opportunity for us as it is for them. They are first generation students, and they're surrounded by, in many cases in this community, other first generation students, or perhaps people that don't have that kind of information readily available. So we can take this opportunity to learn with them. And I really like the opportunity that I had to work with parents in the Metas program, because we've been learning about majors, about schools, enrollment, financial aid every single year. And I met with parents year after year after year, and every year we analyze, like, okay, what's new with financial aid? And some parents are understanding this even when their students are not even ready to go to high school yet. So it's a learning process. Understand that you will learn a lot, and you're not going to learn it all in one go, right? If your student is applying this season, you perhaps will not have all the information to make that decision with them, and that's okay. They are going to have to maybe reach out to somebody else and get some additional information. It's okay to learn as you go. You're not going to have all the answers, and just because you don't have all the answers, you shouldn't dismiss everything quickly, right? So there is a lot of learning that needs to be done on both sides, on the student side and on the family and relatives as well.
Yeah.
Um,
If I may quickly add, Sharon, to that,
Mhm.
that also understanding that, you know, a lot of the times at 18, most people don't know what they want to do. And
Mhm.
so like, not everybody knows that they want to go to college or that they don't want to go to college or that they want to work or that, you know, whatever. And
Right.
so I think it's important to also understand that at 18 years old, like you're starting to figure out what this thing called life is about, and your parents are also trying to start to learn to see you as an adult, right? Like as an adult that's starting to take their own decisions. So I think us also understanding that after high school or after you're about to graduate high school, there's like all these new experiences that are about to happen, and decisions might not be made by fall.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Okay, so moving on to our next question. How do we balance the individual need of the young adult versus the collective need of the family? And so we're gonna go with the same order this time around too. Myra?
That's a really good question. You know, there's a dicho, la cultura cura, right? So we've got a beautiful culture that's very diverse in Latin America. And we also have things about our culture that are not about shaping an individual, right? They're about the collective. And there's so much importance in that and value in having a collective framework. So, and right, there's always that and it's important living in the United States to understand that there is a process, a developmental process of individuation where young people have to have the freedom to develop their own ideas, to make their own decisions, to live the consequences of those decisions, right? And so I do some work with a collaborator, Coque Saavedra, is a psychologist, and I have a PhD in neuroscience, and so in my work as a scientist, I was looking at frontal lobe development, and one of the things that's important is for us to understand the last part of the brain to develop is the frontal lobe, and that is the part that helps us with decision making. And so we have to learn how to scaffold. So de a poco poquito, right? You begin to help the young person develop decision-making skills that are low stakes, meaning if they make a mistake, the consequence is not that great, right? And then as they get a little older, then you're helping them make more decisions that maybe cost them a little more if they make a mistake, but you're building a net, right? You're helping support them. So when they make a decision that is not a good one, you're there to pick them up. And then as they get a little older, we've got to let them fall and get themselves back up on their own. And so for me, the piece around our culture that needs to change is this idea around individuation, right? We really need to be able to allow different ways of being to show up in our families. I will say that it requires open-mindedness on both the young person and the family's side, right? It's not one-sided. So as a young person, I also have to develop some skills around asking for what I need and being able to say what's going on in my internal world. And so we have to also have some structures to help young people be able to step into those skills. And for the parents, right, the skill of letting go is a really important skill. And so learning how to take the supports off in tiered. The last thing I'll say about this, because I'm sure all of the young folks have a lot of important things to say, is for me personally, when I would bring new ideas into the house, right, it wasn't just my parents who were resisting the new ideas, right? It was my brothers and sisters. It was also my friends sometimes, right? And so this process of individualization also has to go into the community at large, and we have to normalize being unique and bringing diverse ideas into all of the spaces that we're in. And so I'll pass it off.
Carlos?
Yeah, so I really like what Myra said about the let them fall in order for them to like learn and let them get up by themselves. Luckily, well, it was being a first generation student, it was all different for me and my family. Like it was the first time around that someone was going to college, so it wasn't really like we didn't really know how to deal with it or what was going to happen, right? And I'm lucky enough that to have my parents support in everything I do. Um, they get involved to an extent to where they're supportive, but they also help. Like, okay, let me give you some advice if needed. Luckily, well, when I came in as a freshman, I mean, we're 18 years old and we still really don't know what we want again. But I came in as a kinesiology major, and it took me one semester to figure out that it's something I didn't really want. So having that talk with my parents, it was different, I guess, because I went in as a freshman kinesiology major with this like goal in mind that I wanted to be a physical therapist, and my parents were already painting these like beautiful pictures that I was gonna be this physical therapist that was gonna help everyone. But when I came back that December, I told them that's a route I didn't want to take, and they were kind of like bummed out, you could say, because it was something that they thought of highly that it was. And then but I mean, I always had the support in them. When I told them I wanted to be a teacher, that's something that I really wanted to attack and I want to be. And luckily they were super supportive in my change of majors, in my change of career. And it's something that parents need to take in, that sometimes it's support, and change is good sometimes.
Thank you. Beatrice?
For the individual versus collective, the one thing that comes to mind is trust. I think, well, my experience, I stayed home. My sister, she went to Santa Cruz, so we're able to like reflect on our experience. She was 45 minutes away, but I stayed home and I liked it. I was able to commute. I was able to be present with my family. It did also have some, you know, cause and effect. Like there was times I was responsible for the younger people at home, but at the same time, I had that support. Like some like side stories would be like when I was on my first semester, I remember I was struggling with some like report and reading a book, and sometimes it'll be like I went to a college prep and everything in my classes, it was kind of broken down. I already knew some of the stuff that was going to happen in college, how to do cite my papers. I knew about research, and I knew how to put together like essays that were more than 3 pages, for example. But once you get to college, it felt like it was less hand holding. So finding myself together in that, it felt like heavy. And so I actually went through a lot of anxiety because of it. And I remember being like at home at 12 o'clock at night, stressing over it. And my mom would wake up and she'd be like, "Why are you still up?" And I was like, "I just can't figure this out." And one time I started crying and she said, "It's okay. Just leave it alone." Like in Spanish, she said, "No pasa nada. Si quieres desatenderte, like, like unenroll from college, it's fine." The moment my mom said that to me, I felt like she gave me permission to say to me, if you like continue college or don't, to me, you're still here for me. Like you're still my daughter. Like if you do this, it's because you want to, not because you have pressure from me. And that was very important. She gave me that trust. She gave me that individuality and independence from choosing my major. So from parents, I just want to say that myself, that was helpful for my parents to do that. But at the same time, she was there and she was supportive. There was days here at San Jose I would stay all night till like 3 a.m. Like this was like downtown kind of culture where like we might be on a Tuesday night studying, and then at 11 o'clock we'll go to like this restaurant that was called Chacho's and get tacos because it was taco night, and then come back to the 5th floor that was like the cultural center, and we kept studying and like having meetings, and it was like group work. And so for me, having that and being able to call my mom and say, hey, like I can't come home, and she's like, I'll bring you dinner like at 10 o'clock. And she was doing college with me. If I were to do a conference presentation, or I were to do something, or an exam was coming up, I would study with her and show her my stuff and be able to bounce off ideas. And it was like, because I was able to share that with her, even though she didn't see the whole perspective, she was able to see what I was going through. She did even once mention that she was going through a couple of like motherhood circles. She was able to share about like, I didn't know that this is what my daughter needed from me, even from a younger generation. I didn't know that my daughter needs a peace of mind, and there's certain things I need to shut out and not place on her, like when I was in elementary, and for her to not know of other family issues so she could focus on her work. And she was able to grow in that way alongside with me and know what I was going through. So when I graduated, I didn't want to do the whole ceremony because I hate waiting for 2 to 3 hours for them to name my name and give me a diploma. But I did a smaller ceremony because I realized at the end that the college degree I was receiving was not just me, because it was on like my full family. It was collective, like the rights my brother gave me, the food my mom brought me, like everything that everyone did for me. It was a collective work, and I'm able to bring that home and have that representation for like my nephews and nieces that now ask me about college. Like I have a niece right now that is 15 and it's preparing for that. So it brings a full circle. And that's what I would say versus individual and collective.
Thank you. Miguel?
Yeah, definitely agree with everything that's being touched on. I think as a parent, it's important. I mean, I'm not a parent, so I guess I'm kind of being hypocritical here. I don't have kids yet. That, but the way I look at it, I do have a younger sister who's currently studying, and I definitely helped my parents a lot when they were like asking questions about like, how do you balance that, like letting your child know that you're down to support their education, but the piggy bank isn't unlimited either, right? So how do you balance that? I think if you have a child that's motivated to go to university, don't cut off their wings. Let them go to school. It's their life at the end of the day. I know they're going to be the ones stressing out to study for the final, for the midterm, to get an internship, to get a side job, to have extra money, to then get a job after they graduate or go to master's. Like that's their life. Don't limit them if they have dreams and aspirations. If there is an instance where perhaps the student wants to go to a school, and usually bring this up with like private schools that are very expensive, like St. Mary's, for example, and then like you can't afford that, then I think it should be an honest conversation. Be like, hey, we can't help you with paying that much either, just so the child is also understanding, because so they could come to an agreement, right, if there needs to be one. Thankfully we live in a state where we have awesome public institutions that can provide education to anybody really. But I would say one of the things that I see is sometimes parents want to like maybe hold their child, close, right, and not let them venture out. Like I think it's important for them to grow their life. Like I tell many immigrant parents, like, y'all left your home in El Rancho or wherever to come here and did your own thing. So let your son or daughter do the same. If they got to move to Atlanta, or if they got to go to Milwaukee or maybe another country, like let them do it, and don't discriminate or differentiate just because she's your daughter, that you have more regulations on them that they have if it was a boy, because that tends to happen a lot in our households. And we do got to break some of these habits that we have in our households that are not good for our mental health and well-being, right, and can cause trauma. So if you have a son or daughter that's really motivated to go to school, just let them fly. And if you know that maybe they're not as motivated, try to instill in them that they can be at home, work, and do community college and try it out and see if it's for them, or try looking into CTE programs, right? It's kind of like finding that balance between you and your children, and always have those conversations. Don't put them off until they're a 12th grader. It's always good to bring them up when they're 9th, 10th, and 11th, even middle school, to just have that open dialogue so they don't feel afraid, where maybe they want to apply to NYU, but they're afraid because they're like, I'm gonna have to leave across the country, and will my parents be able to afford it? Like, you don't want to have your child feel shy to come to you, right? To have that conversation, be part of that conversation, just like Beatriz mentioned, right? So that when they cross that stage, it's the family that's crossing together, not just the individual.
Thank you, Miguel. Blanca?
Yeah, I think an important point to mention, in addition to like all these amazing points that have been made, is that every family's needs and every individual's needs are going to be extremely different. And so we can share our personal stories and like what our personal experience with our families were. But I think at the end of the day, like, everybody's going to have a different need based on the situation they are currently living. And so, I'll share a little bit of my story at the time. Like, at the time when I started college, my parents were going through divorce, and my younger brother had just started middle school. And so, while it did affect me, as like, like when I was like 20 at the time already, while it did affect me, I at least understood and had some kind of like emotional maturity to understand, like, I know that this needs to happen, but my little brother did not, right? And so, and there's also that need of my parents needed to have their own personal space to go through whatever issue they were going through. And so at that point, not only was I a college student, but like Beatriz says, we end up having to take responsibility of the younger folks in the house. And so ever since my brother was like 11 or 12 years old, all of his school papers were signed by me. Like, all of his report cards are signed by me. All of his school interviews, his parent meetings, like, everything was like Blanca showing up. And, and at the moment, at some point, I also made this decision of like, he at some point ended up at a private high school, and this private high school also allowed him the opportunity to travel abroad for a year. And that was the year that I was supposed to transfer, because I went to community college. And so it was, you could say, like, the personal need I had at that moment. Like, I needed somebody else to take care of him while I took care of myself, because my parents were still not in a position to fully care for him because he was still 16 years old. And so I told him to go, and I participated in like the interview for like the parent for him to be able to go to Italy, and this like host family in Italy took him in and took care of him for a year, and I would call them every week, and and they were amazing. Like, my brother would call me and be like, "Oh, la señora hasta me plancha los calzones," And so it was like this really amazing experience that I didn't feel that I needed to worry for my brother for a year, and I could go away to college when I needed to transfer. And so again, it's like that idea of what we need as a family and what we need as individuals is going to change based on our own situation that's happening at the moment, right? And and this really important thing that Maida said and that someone else mentioned was the whole thing of let them fall, And so because I did take care of my younger brother since he was very young, I did feel like his parent, right? Like, till this day, I still feel like his parent. And so I still call and yell at him and whatever. And he's like 30 years old. And I'm like, get out, And so there's this idea that, that even though he's not like my biological child, he's my brother. I also had this like parental responsibility of understanding that, of understanding from him telling me like, hey, let me make my own mistakes, right? Because I was like, don't do this, don't do that. And like, I need you to do this and I need you to take care of that. And he was like, but I need you to let me make my own mistakes. And I was like, shoot, okay. Like, all right, go, right? But in the back of my mind, I was like, I'm gonna let you go make your own mistakes, but like, if you mess up, I'm coming in kind of thing, you know? And so I did. And so, yes, we let them do and experience life, and we let them do their own mistakes, but understanding that we're not letting them go make their mistakes and just kind of like soltándolos and letting them, you know, que se las arreglen como mejor puedan. It's the idea of giving them that confidence of, yes, I'm going to let you learn. I'm going to let you make your mistake, and I'm going to let you see how far you can get, and can you pick yourself up from it, right? And if you can't pick yourself up from it, I'm going to know. And if I know that you can't fix it on your own, I'm coming in, right? And so for my little brother, that was it. I said, fine, go to another state for college. But when he lost his scholarship, he came back and he was like, I'm going to get a $50,000 per year loan. I was like, no, you're not, homeboy. You're coming back home and you're going to community college, you know? And so that was also like what I took care of, right? Like what I took care of, because I also understood that while I, as an undocumented person at the time, did not have access to financial assistance, and I know that this is like a conversation that we're going to touch upon later, I didn't have access to financial assistance, but I also understood that loans were not necessarily always the best idea, and that we were going to have to get loans. They needed to be smart loans, right? Like we needed to think about it wisely. And so for me, it was like, there's no need for him to get loans right now. He's always said he wanted to be a doctor. He's going to get loans when he wants to be a doctor, but like not today, like not on my watch. And so, you know, he went and asked my parents if they would sign his like form for a loan, because of course he was still 19 years old. And by the time he went to tell my parents, I had already spoken to my parents, and I was like, you're not signing anything. Like, you're going to tell him no. And I knew he was going to go to his tutor from Making Waves at the time. And I knew he was going to be like, hey, talk to my parents, convince them, right? So like, you know, cuando tú vas, yo ya vengo y me tomé una Coca-Cola. And so I went and called her and I was like, yo, my little brother's going to call you and he's going to ask you to convince my parents to like sign this paper. And I was like, and I'm going to need you to tell him no. Sure enough, 5 minutes later, she calls me. Hey, your brother just called me. I'm like, I know. Like, did you tell him no? Yeah, okay. And so he enrolled in community college in the fall, right? And I was like, but again, it's dejándolos ir poquito a poquito, let them make their own mistakes, but understanding, right? Like we were there, we were that person at some point, and so we needed to just que nos soltaran la rienda a little bit so we could understand and we could appreciate.
Thank you, Blanca. And I'm going to touch on this when we get to college affordability. So I'm going to keep my comments till we get to that point. Next question is going to be, how does your college experience change based on the experiences of siblings and cousins that came before you? And let's just make sure that we keep it under 2 minutes so that we have enough time to get through everybody and all the questions too. And we're going to start right now. We're going to go the other way around. So Blanca, actually, do you mind starting?
So again, I was first gen, so I didn't have like siblings or close cousins or nobody ever really to go have these conversations with and to try and figure out like, dude, what do I do? And so for me, a lot of the times were people like Mayra, who I went to, and like you know, folks from the Metas program. And so to me, on a personal level, I think I credit a lot of my college making decision to like the Metas folks, because I was in Metas since I was like 8 years old. And so aside from that, like I didn't have anybody in my family that I could turn to and have those conversations. But one of my best friends in high school, her sister was at Davis at the time when I was at Contra Costa. And so I was still trying to figure out life, right? Like I was still trying to have all these decisions made. And so I think even after all the conversations I had with the Metas folks, I still had not figured out what I wanted to do. And it wasn't until I had the conversation with this friend who kind of explained what she was studying, and kind of gave me like options of what I could do with it. I was like, oh shoot, that sounds so interesting, right? Like that's where I want to go. I had visited Davis once and I was like, why not? Like, why not go to Davis, you know? I think for me, you know, kind of intermingling here on the individuality, I'm like, of 4 siblings, I'm the only girl. And so for me, it was always like, I need to be kind of like away from these folks. Like, you know, they're too needy. So I need to like make my own decisions and kind of move on from there. But for me, it was far enough to move away, close enough to be home whenever I was needed. And so that was kind of my decision and a lot of my experience.
Thank you, Blanca. Miguel?
I had a older cousin who was the first one to go to college, and she started off at community college. She got accepted to St. John's in New York, and she had a pretty good offer. But you know, her being daughter and the family just being like old school, didn't want to let her go to New York. And it kind of sucked to see my cousin because she was, you know, she's like me and we were nerds in high school, like really bust your butt to get there. And, you know, you kind of have your parents just hold you back. So when I was going through my options, I got into Cal and my parents were like, you're going to stay at home and commute. And I was like, I don't want to do that. Like, I'm kind of being an individual. I understood with all that, but I was like, I got financial aid, I got scholarships. I want to get the college experience. I want to get out of Richmond because at that point, like, this is different time in Richmond too. I just needed to get away and see something else. And I used that example with my cousin to just be like, I'm not gonna stay here. I'm getting out of here, and I'm gonna grow as a person and not just be spoon fed by my family. Because y'all know, I mean, Carlos knows this, Israel probably do too. Like your mom, when you're in a Latinx household, she's, you know, they spoil you a lot, and sometimes you need to just get away. And it worked out for me. I learned a lot as a first year student at UC Davis, and I enjoyed every single bit of it. Even the tough times, I was able to grow as an adult. So when I have my younger family members now, some that are now in college and some that are thinking about it, I tell them that if they have a hunch of thinking of exploring and going to college outside of home, to try it out, you know, if they really want to. If you don't want to do that and want to stay home, that's totally fine. But I tell them it's like, it's worth trying something new and meeting people from other backgrounds, and, you know, having good times too in college, you know, academically, and also with having a social life as well. So you can, like, you know, have memories as well. So that's what I'm sharing here today, and I'll pass it over to you, back to you, Israel, as the MC.
Miguel. Beatriz?
Yeah. Sorry, right there. I kind of stumbled. So how does my college experience change based on the experience of siblings? I'm actually the youngest in my home. When I spoke about younger people, I was thinking about my cousin that my mom took in when I was like my first year in college. That actually impacted me because I always kind of been taken care of rather than taking care of younger people. So that did impact my grades a lot. Just like Blanca was sharing, I was the person showing up when he didn't want to be in school. I was the person showing up if he couldn't do homework, parent-teacher conferences, and all that stuff. But also, you know, above me, I have 3 older siblings, and my oldest sister, she went through community college and she was ABA 540. She has 4 jobs during the time she was in community college. So I got to see her when she would run from job to job to classes to get home to study, doing all that work and still looking after me. Like I remember being in high school and she was still during lunchtime going taking some lunch. So once I got to college, I remembered that and I got to honor that and be like, wow, Perla, you were doing all of that. And she's like, yeah. And it's just like that hustle. I think since we were younger, my parents showed us how to work and how to be responsible for like the things we want. I even remember being in elementary school, my dad would do the whole like, I'll give you $5 or $10 for like if you get an A or something. He kind of did it for a while for my older siblings. And then when I got to middle school, my dad stopped doing that. And he's like, no, if you get an A, like that doesn't change nothing for me. I still do what I do. If you get an A, you're doing it for yourself. And I think that kind of taught me the mentality. If I show up to class, I'm doing it for myself in that sense. But it also showed me in some sense, like, I feel like I actually worked. I did get financial aid in terms of grants and a couple scholarships, but every semester I knew my budget and I knew like I need to work this much, and I would do it like in a tanda format, like in my mind. From every check, I have to take out like 250 or 500 for my savings because next month I need $5,000 to pay that tuition. And so that reminded me that every time I'm showing up to class, even in my last semester, I learned this skill from a girl in business. She used to divide her classes and her units and the hours she was showing up. The tuition she would divide it and say, like, if I don't show up to this class, I'm wasting $150 or $183. And I was like, damn, I didn't think about it like that. I showed that through a program that I did for high school students, and then saying like, if you're doing your A's, you're like raising like your opportunities for scholarships and for the amount of money that you can tap in. But not even that. Every time you apply to a scholarship, you're raising your statistics of how many you could get support from. I think I got the experience of seeing my sister, and she's right here, so she's gonna hear how Petiro Flores. She is my middle sister, and she got to go to a UC. And I got to see like there's the benefits, but there's also like the downfall where like she did say that there was moments like earlier imposter syndrome was mentioned. There's moments where like you don't have people to relate to, so then you start finding your groups, right? Like, you start finding like Locorico at college. You start finding maybe even the kids that are in Mecha and that are in EOP and stuff like that. Because I at times they couldn't go to EOP; they had different rules, so I didn't get to access that. When I chose my college, there was no probability, there was no outlook that the California Dream Act was around the corner, and actually didn't know DACA was going to pass. I had to make a decision in May, and then DACA passed in 2012 in July. So I kind of just got lucky with being able to, now I get to work legally. I know that it's different for the new generation that doesn't get to apply to DACA. And it is also like something I feel that along the years, we discovered different ways of earning money in a legal way with like independent contracting. But with seeing my sister, I was able to compare like my sister who like she got, A's and B's. Like she had like, I think a 4.0 when she graduated high school. She got a full ride to UC. And then my sister who worked 4 jobs and she went to a community college. And at the same time, my middle sister always kind of pushed me, even though when I was in second grade, she's like, next year you need to learn how to do cursive. I'm gonna teach you cursive. She was always like pushing me above. She's like, next year you're gonna learn multiplication and algebra. And so I was always like in front. She would make me do homework with her, like the same stuff. And I got to have that. And now as being someone that is in that position and have nephews and nieces, I'm able to do that for them. But also, like everyone here has mentioned, is letting people also have their journey. Because when my family were able to trust me with making my decisions, trust me that I was, okay, if you want to work and earn it yourself, that's okay. Trust me with choosing my major or choosing my school, I was able to have that accountability that I'm making these decisions and not later be like, because my parent told me to do this. And my parents would often say, no, I want you to make the decision because I don't want this coming back on me and say like, oh, well, you had me go to here or you kept me back. Like my parents gave me permission to make that decision within the resources I had in like parameters of this is how much you get of scholarships and this is where you can like, tap into. So I would say that.
Thank you, Beatriz. Now we are moving on to Carlos.
Yeah, so again, I'm a first generation college student across my whole family that's here in the US. So it was the first time that really anyone in my family's was seeing someone go to college. And mine, I guess my experience was a little different just because I was getting recruited by colleges. So the college process looked a little different to me as an athlete. But it's an experience that I really don't change for anything, because along those visits that I was having with schools, my younger brother and my younger cousin were able to go with me and experience those colleges as well. So they were seeing what, like, everything else that was outside of out of Richmond, like Miguel said, like, right in Richmond, it's kind of like people don't really expect much for someone like to come out and succeed, or like they don't really see something that's out of Richmond, something bigger. And being able to go through that college process for the first time and being able to make an option, have options out there, it was different for my family because it was something different. It was something that they never experienced themselves either. And my little siblings now, my younger sibling is going through the community college route, so it's two different routes that they were able to see. And it's important for parents to be supportive during those process, because it could be very, very frustrating, very, how can I say, hectic, and sometimes you could feel stressed during that process, because on one hand you want to go experience life, you want to go as far away as possible from your parents. As much as I love mine, I was spoon fed as well by my mom. You know, she would always tell me, she's like, no te vayas tan lejos, que aquí te quiero conmigo para siempre, right? Which is like, I mean, I love my mom, but it's something that it was a hard decision, because I wanted to leave, but I also wanted to be close. And much like Blanca, I chose a place where I'm comfortable at. It's very family oriented here in Bakersfield, and it's super close where I could go back home and be with my family, or they could come visit me as well. And yeah.
Thank you, Carlos. Myra?
Yeah, I had a really different experience. So I got pregnant when I was 17 and graduated pregnant. And so I had to take some time off to be a parent. And so this is something important for parents to also understand. Not everybody is going to go to college right out of high school. And many of us are going to make life decisions that create an alternative path for us, but that doesn't mean we can't go that route. And it doesn't mean that we are not going to be successful. So I just want to plant that seed, because I know when parents come to see me, they're like, oh, este muchacho, esta muchacha anda en esto, anda haciendo otra cosa. And I have to just remind them of my story, right? Not everyone has a traditional path directly there. And some of us just need to learn who we are by experiencing life outside of the educational system. And so I also was the first person to go to college. So I wasn't living at home with my parents, and I didn't have anybody that was a model for me. But I did have folks at the community college that were mentors of mine because I was in this program. And so what I ended up doing was actually, because my mom cleaned houses for a living, I cleaned houses for a living while I was going to college and was doing my undergrad. I actually had a full-time job because I had my son. And when I could not take any more classes at the community college during the night, I had no choice. I had to quit my day job. And the only thing I could do to make enough money was clean houses. And so one of the things that's really important that I learned from my family is that no job is a bad job, right? We all, no matter what we're doing, do it con ganas and do it with respect. And that money allowed me to go to college. And I also worked on campus doing odd jobs, being office assistant. So trying to piecemeal all of those pieces. I was also, when I transitioned, because I'm also an Aggie, there's so many connections, Richmond High and UC Davis. So when I transitioned to Davis, I couldn't work, right? And so I really applied to every single scholarship under the face of the earth. I must have applied to about 40 of them. And so I got really lucky and got most of my education paid for as a single mom, and was living in housing. And so that's the other piece, right? There are additional resources when we are untraditional students that we can tap into, but it does take a lot of effort and a lot of work to go that route. And so I guess I'll just close by saying that creativity right, is super important, because it doesn't matter what your condition is, whether your parents te están chiqueando or whether you're by yourself, right, and raising a kid, you have to get creative. Our parents have to get creative because college is expensive. That's just a way of life in the United States. It is expensive, and we have to get creative about how we plan ahead and how we get resources for our folks.
Thank you, Myra. So we have a question that ties into these past two questions that we've touched on. So what is an example of what being supportive looks like from parents? So we're gonna go in the same order this time. So Blanca, do you mind starting?
Yeah, I was actually just typing a note exactly on this. And it links not just to parents, but also to like undocumented families. I think for undocumented families, for low-income families, for families that are experiencing a lot of difficult situations, it's very important to understand that these students have already been through so much, right? Like if they had in mind that they wanted to go to college, they've already been through so much. So much has already been denied to them. So much will be denied to them. And it's super important to understand that as parents, the parents should not be this other obstacle in the way of the student trying to achieve the success that they want to achieve. And so it is super important to provide them, again, right, going back into provide them the support that they need to go on to experience life, but also understanding that you're still their parent. They're still going to come back to you for some kind of support, you know, whether it's like, ay, mami, necesito, you know, like your arroz con leche this weekend. It was a tough week. And so, you know, again, I went far enough to move away, but close enough to come back. And whatever the case might be, I think just understanding that as parents, allowing them to make their mistake or to make these really good decisions, the last thing as parents that we should be is like an obstacle. If anything, we should be continuing to push them forward. And if they fall, like, Mira, I believe in you, whatever it is, like, get up, dust yourself off, because that's what immigrant parents did, right? They got up, dusted themselves off, like crossed that border, came on that plane, got on that ship, whatever it was. And so it's the same idea. We're like just continuing what you taught us, to dust ourselves up, get up, and keep on going.
Thank you. Miguel?
I think something that would be helpful as a parent would be to definitely don't be an obstacle. Like Blanca was mentioning, don't be like, mijo, vas a venir este fin de semana que hay party. You know, like it's cool if they want to come, they'll come. Visit them. Embed yourself in the school as well. Like when they're in high school, go with them to take them to San Francisco State. Be surprised how many students don't know what San Francisco State looks like and they apply. Same with Contra Costa College, Berkeley City. You know, don't just wait for that field trip that they take every year to Berkeley. San Jose State, if you can, you know, see colleges with them so that you can see what their life is going to be like in the future. When they go to college, if they're going like out of town, like Davis or Chico State or like Bakersfield, Monterey Bay, sometimes it's tough. You think about it, it's like if I'm gonna go home, like I gotta go, I'm gonna have to find a study, like there's gonna be room, there's kids running around, like Chuck E. Cheese, like it's tough. Like go visit them. Stop by, crash if you need to crash at their place or get a hotel. Like I always like that. And my parents were always expecting me to come like almost every week. And there was a moment like I didn't go for like a whole quarter, and I was just like, if y'all want to see me, y'all need to come over here because I'm busy. And plus, y'all never even seen Davis before, and then they came and we went to go eat, and they had a good time. So by the time that they came to see me graduate, like they more or less at least knew where to park. Like I think that would have been something that would have been more cool because I had like a lots of friends who were from LA. And I was always surprised that like their family would come all the way up and be like, wow, they're busting a mission. Like my parents don't live an hour away and they don't want to come. They want me to go over there. But yeah, I think that would be cool. If you have the ability to do so, of course, it's just see what college looks like. If they're part of a club on campus and they're doing a presentation, go support them, go see what they're doing. Go sit if there's open seats in lecture, go just check it out. Just see what your kid is studying, just so you get yourself in there and see it firsthand.
Thank you, Miguel.
Yeah.
Beatriz?
Wow. So everything that has been mentioned brought up so many memories for me. I'd say one of the things that was very helpful for me was because my parents were able to go through it with me, I think they were able to reflect on what we were going through. What Miguel mentioned, actually, because I went to the school that since ninth grade, they were teaching us what was the major. They're teaching us everything about college because that was like their goal, like, prepare them for college. I forgot that not all students get to go on college tours. We were able to visit colleges when we were juniors and seniors. Like we did two, like in each tour, we would do a full week of visiting college all over California. And for me, being there and being present and seeing like the centers and seeing financial aid, like seeing the whole structure, how in a university works, operations wise, like, you have to show up to enroll. I was like, what? It's different than financial aid office. And it's like, you also have to like get accepted by the college and by the major and this and what's an undergrad. And I think my parents showing up to those meetings, like parent meetings where they were able to see like what they were teaching us, and they were also learning that kind of like college language. I think, and another part is like my mom signed up to foster family, and so while I was in college, I was also helping with that. And she was able to take child development classes and trauma-informed classes where she learned about like what it meant to care for a person under the age of 25, even not just K through 12, not just 0 to 5. And since she was going through those classes, she told me like, wow, like she was able to recognize like the stuff we went through just alone as being immigrants or the child of like parents that moved in like migration. And so she once said to me, I'm sorry I put you through that, like having to look after your cousins when you were freshman year. I didn't realize that you need all this space to focus in your study. You don't need this additional stress. Like her recognizing that, me saying like, no, I'm glad I was able to support you. I do wish I would have also been able to communicate to you, this is too much. Like I didn't know that skill, and that communication, I think, grew after we went through that experience. I think that for my mom, it was like her being able to take care of me was great. But like I mentioned at the beginning, the trust, my parents giving us trust, it's a great way to like become independent and individual and responsible. I also saw it with my father, like even like it was mentioned, like parents showing up to like Miguel just mentioned, so what your children are doing, like a presentation, or if they're doing folklorico, like it creates a sense of pride. When my dad went to drop off my sister, we all went together to drop her off at her dorm. I could see that sense of pride, or seeing his daughter like walk into this dorm where like she's able to take up space with all these other students, and like, wow, my daughter studied and got all these A's, and she did all of this for herself. Like her studies was paying for her, like all of this. And I remember they would be excited and tell their family, like, my daughter is going to this university on this mountain, and she gets to see the ocean. So like, even though they don't may not be at the actual classes with us, they're able to feel the experience. And for parents that sometimes it's difficult to show up in the same spaces as your children because schools may not create that community or that welcoming atmosphere, I say like try to take space and like go to, like it was mentioned, on those field trips, or take them, like Miguel say, to go see the universities, or when they are going to enroll, show up, look at the places they'll be in, or to ask questions and get to hear them out on what their needs are. And definitely always like taking food during finals. It's always great. So yeah, that would be my suggestions.
Thank you. Carlos?
Yeah, all these like talks are making me remember all these past 4 years that I've gone through here in college, that my parents have like pretty much experienced it with me as well. But it's also just like a lot of the speakers have mentioned, it's being educated yourself as a parent. Like understand, like there's colleges out there, like go visit, go learn something new about a college that a lot of our parents don't know. My parents don't really know about colleges either up until I was getting involved. But it's also, don't be another reason for stress. When you're in college, you have papers due, you have work due. Some nights you have so much homework that's due on one night and you're stressed already enough, and then you get a phone call from your mom, oh, how are you doing? Like, when are you gonna come? It's like my mom always calls me every single week, and she says, ¿Y cuándo vas a venir? ¿Cuándo regresas? I'm like mom, I just told you yesterday that I was going back in my next break, my next availability. And it's something that parents are, it's, if they're guilty of something, is loving you, right? Loving you like to the point where they want to nourish you and they always want to be there for you. That's what a parent should do. But in a way, they have to be able to understand that, it's okay for allowing students to, or allowing their kids to figure things out on their own. So like my parents are always there for me, but they give me the freedom where I know, like, sometimes if I'm stuck, I could take the freeway out and just call my parents like, oh, I need help on this. But sometimes it comes to my mind like, no, like I need to be my own person, and sometimes I need to make decisions for myself. I know my parents are going to be there to help, but I need to be my own person. And it's just something that has to happen along the way.
Thank you, Carlos. Myra?
Yeah, I'm going to take the approach because of all of the really impactful advice that all of the other panelists gave, which is critical. I'm going to take the tact of advising parents. You really have to have your own life, and you have to be self-sufficient, and you have to be happy with where you are. And so a lot of times when I'm dealing with the question of, can my daughter go out of the state to college, or can my son, go to this other place? I really want him to stay in San Francisco State, but he wants to do something in Cal Poly, right? When I'm having those conversations with parents, usually at the end, I can identify that the parents have not fully lived their lives to their full potential and haven't accomplished their own goals. And so the way that I try to help support the family unit is help the parents also develop their own goals. So we've had a lot of examples of parents who wanted to own a business, wanted to go back to college, wanted to do this, wanted to do that, and haven't had those opportunities. And so a lot of times, because I'm a mom too, my son is 31, so I've had the experience of messing up and calling him to feel better, right? And being really clear now, that doesn't do him any justice, and it doesn't do me any justice, right? I have to figure out as a mom, where am I going to get my emotional and my mental health taken care of? That should not be the responsibility of my child. It's the other way around. I should be focusing on supporting my child so that their mental health is well. And so I really loved what Carlos and Miguel shared around, right? Like, even when we're trying to be good and we're trying to do the laundry and we're trying to make the food and we're saying, vente para acá para poder cuidarte, we have to reframe things, right? That's more sometimes about what we need to feel fulfilled as parents than it is about really trying to take care of our young people. And so we have to listen to what they want. And not every child wants the same things, right? And not every young adult wants the same things. And so Beatriz and Blanca were talking about how their siblings had different experiences and didn't need the same thing as they needed. And so we also have to treat our children as individuals and know that there's not a recipe, right? We really have to have those conversations and ask the question, ¿Qué necesitas, mija? ¿Qué necesitas, mijo? Right? And like really listen to what they're asking you for and honor what they're asking for, because it takes a lot to be able to tell our parents what we want. But if you all want to be supportive, then you all have to listen and then actually engage in that action that your children, your young people are asking for. And I will also say, mental health issues are real. I don't know any student who's gone to college and has not had to deal with mental health issues. I haven't had one student who has not had any mental health issues. Let me say that again. I've been doing this for 20 years. Every student I talk to is dealing with some level of anxiety when they go off to college. It is really stressful. And sometimes they cannot ask the parents for what they need. And so as parents, we also have to learn that when our young people are quiet or not engaging in conversation, figuring out how to provide support from the community so that they can have other adults that they maybe can talk to, or have other family members who've gone through college they can talk to, because maybe they can open up in that way to other folks in a way that they can't really open up to you, because not because they don't love you, but because they don't want to burden you, because they know what's going on in the home, because they know you're stressed and they want to be good children and they don't want to add any more stress to your life. And so those are the two things. Ask them for what they want and then do it and listen. And then the other thing is that know that offer other people other resources so that they can develop those relationships and have those honest conversations with other folks that can support them.
Thank you, Myra. Okay, so moving on to our next question. It's, what are ways to preserve your culture / rituals in less diverse or predominantly white institutions or college spaces? Let's go back to the first order. So Myra, you're gonna go first.
Yeah, that's a really great question. So, you know, I went to UC Berkeley for my graduate degree, and that's where really I had to do a lot of work to keep my culture. At UC Davis, because I was so busy being a single mom and doing school, it was just a very different environment. I really wasn't part of the campus culture. But at Berkeley, my son was old enough that I could sort of have a social life. And in graduate school, things were different because you're part of this lab culture. And so there, I noticed I stopped wearing lipstick. You see, I'm wearing the red lipstick. I always wear red lipstick. I got big earrings, you know, I do my nails. I do the thing, right? And when I got there, the young women weren't wearing makeup, right? They were dressing in a different way than I was used to. So I always felt like I stuck out like a sore thumb. But not just that, they were all of a sudden vegetarian or vegan. And I was like wanting to eat my carnitas. And, you know, there's like all of these culture shock moments when you go to college and you're like, oh my God, you know, you start to question. And so for me, it was continuing to stay connected to my community in a way that honored the way I was brought up, and that educated people about where I come from a place of pride, but also being open to exploring what they were doing. So for example, I went vegetarian for a while, and then one of my friends who was Jewish was like, well, let me try pig, like, the cross-cultural piece. And I think that when you are proud and bring your culture from a place of strength, that folks get curious, and then you can educate them about it. And so there is a piece around, I want to say microaggressions that happens. And I'll share this really short story. One of, when I went to defend my, for my orals, one of the men on my committee, and let me explain what orals are. So when you're finishing your PhD, in the middle of it, you have a big test, and it's an oral test. It's like an all-day test where professors are asking you questions, and you maybe have to write things. And if you don't pass it, you don't get to move forward. So it's a really big deal, and you spend like 2 years preparing for it. So it's a really, really big deal. And when I was getting ready to do my orals, there was a professor who said, Myra, don't you come in with any of that ethnic stuff. I don't want to see any of that. You're coming in here and you're going to be professional. That's what he said to me. You're going to be professional. As if, what? Like, so I talked to my advisor and I said, first of all, I was offended by what he said to me. And luckily I had an advisor who was really thoughtful and who appreciated the cultural diversity that I was bringing. So you know what I did? So for my orals, I went and got pan dulce from the bakery. I laid out my Mexican, ¿cómo se dice? El rebozo, and I put it on the table. I brought some tamales and some atole, and then I hugged everybody because they don't like to touch, right? Culturally, we hug and everything. This guy did not know what to do. The reason I'm bringing this up is because people get uncomfortable around diversity, right? That's not our problem. That is their problem. And so I just want to say it's important for us to assert our right to be who we are and to bring our cultural heritage with us completely. Se me apaga la luz. So that's the best I can do around keeping your cultural heritage.
Thank you. Okay, Carlos?
Yeah, so something I really like about Bakersfield is that it's so culturally diverse that everyone super welcomes you with open arms, and you see people from different countries that become your friends. Like here, I have teammates that are from Ireland, Australia, England, Saudi Arabia. I have one coming in from Jamaica that it's so different. Like their cultures are so different to ours that it's to me it's super cool because you learn about their heritage, their culture, their ways of eating. Sometimes my parents come and they make some frijoles, and they're all fascinated by how good frijoles taste, right? And it's something like for us, it's always at the house, so it's super cool. And like sometimes we have little potlucks where us Latinos we take tacos, we take tamales, we take something, and it's so cool to be able to be in a place here in Bakersfield where the culture diversity is so open and you could be yourself, not having to worry about like having to switch or having to put this mask on just to feel welcome, or to be one, like to be just another one of that kind.
Thank you. And we're moving on to Beatriz.
Yeah, I personally was not one to like generally join like extracurricular stuff. I mean, like, we would say extracurricular in high school, but like clubs in college, because when I was in class, I was working. Like I would wake up at 3 a.m., go to my work at 5 a.m., get off work at 1 p.m., do night classes or like afternoon classes. After my night classes were over at 8 p.m., I would be in the library. And like, I think for me, because I did stay in my city, I did get to have like the resources that I already had in high school. Like I know I can go back to my school and like volunteer. I know that I applied to an internship, and the proposal I said like any social impact project. Like, and when I wrote that proposal, I went to a friend that was like my best friend's brother, and being able to tap into not just like my older siblings, but also my friends' siblings that went to college, they were able to provide like some sort of mentorship. And I remember like being very like confused, like how do I propose something? Like, what do I do? What do I know? And he said like aside from the data, and because I wanted to do work with high school students, aside from the data and the statistics, you are a subject expert. You're part of your comunidad. I was like, so when you put this proposal together, remember that you know about what your community needs. And when we read these reports, yes, we can provide this information, but remember that you're not like someone that doesn't know something. And I think for me, it was very hard. Like even like my sister, when she did folkloric, I'm not a person of stage or like theater, but I didn't really know where to go. Like a lot of people tell you, join clubs, join some sort of volunteering something, join something that where you can find your group of people. And I didn't have that because I had to work. And so for me, it was as like, if I'm going to apply to an internship that's paid, I'm going to go back to my community. If I'm going to seek a mentor or I'm going to seek a program, I wanted to find it within my community. When I studied, I would go to the floor, because it's a 9-story floor here at Martin Luther King. I would go to the floor where you would see all like the Mexican American studies and Chicano studies, like art and books. So I was able to talk to people that like sometimes I would leave to the bathroom and be like, can you watch my stuff? And like meet people that were getting out of the meta like meeting. And I think I felt more like safe in that setting. I also got to go to college with my best friend. So that was for me a safety net because we did things together. And I didn't go to that college because of my best friend. It just happened that it worked for both of us. But always going back to community. I also had the experience when I tried to join a club and it didn't work. I'm a global studies major, which the major is in the same department as the geography major, and it's a very white dominant like space at the time when I was there. And I remember the club wanted to get together like a potluck, and like myself being Mexicana showing I would like bring something. I was like, okay, I'll bring pasteles fritas. And I show up with like more than enough food, and everyone brings like little stuff. I'm like, I literally just catered to you guys. And like just even knowing that, I was like, okay, this space is different. Knowing that when even professors will do microaggressions, there were moments I was like, no, you will not tell me what my community, like my experience is. Yeah, you could like tap into research, but I know my experience, and that could hurt. So I knew like those spaces, and I knew what like those professors came back from. I was the type of person that would look at the colleges they graduated from. So I was like, oh, this person's coming from this place. And I would look at the research they had published. So I would be like, oh, that's who you are. And so I don't know if that's just like something because I was doing research of what to master in, but it kind of brought light to they are people too. And although they do academia, that doesn't mean that they have to dictate your experience and change it. And that helped me kind of reverse that imposter syndrome of saying like, okay, that's their experience, their point of view. And it also helped me find the professors that I felt that I knew they knew more about my experience and that could provide that guidance. And even I didn't do study abroad, but I did research with geography majors, where we went on like a week-long like trip to national parks. And I knew that when I was in that space and the people that were there with me, I knew like what it was like. And I was like, okay, I know that this is a space of microaggression. Also protecting ourselves, because there is going to be colleges that are very white dominant. And yes, you are going to go through times that you're going to have to make a decision that you may not want to like share certain information with certain professors because that might not feel safe for you. And that is okay. Like being able to monitor that and feel safe and in control of that. So I would say that.
Thank you. Okay, so Miguel and Blanca, I'm gonna let you guys answer this question. but if you feel like you want to pass on to the next one, that's okay too. So Miguel, go ahead.
Yeah, for me, I was very fortunate that my junior year in high school, Richmond High, they took us to Davis, and BSU, Black Student Union, gave us a tour. And even though obviously like BSU is led by students who identify as Black on campus at UC Davis, it did tell us that if you get here, you're gonna find Latinos. Trust me, because we couldn't find anybody. But I was like, this campus is too pretty. Like I really like it here. I can see myself going here. I'll make it happen. Sure enough, like the first week of school, Davis has an event that a lot of campuses have across California called Bienvenida. And that's when all the Latinx clubs and organizations and the Chicano Studies department team up, and then they table, and you really get to meet a lot of pretty much like Latinos. And it was pretty cool because right away I joined a bunch of different organizations, and then I found out about Chicano Studies. I didn't know what it was. And I took one class, and sure enough, that's where all the raza's at. And then I started making friends left and right. And then I just ran with it. I didn't envision myself taking Chicano classes like that. And I loved it so much that I tried to take like one every quarter until they were like, mijo, it's not a minor no more, it's a double major. So ya no más. But it was really cool being able to be from Richmond. There's always somebody from Richmond that's somewhere. So coming from here, I knew through some of my family members, like people who had gone to like LPS or gone to other schools that were at Davis. And then even though we didn't know each other, we had never met each other, they always extended the hand and kind of like showed me around campus, like, this is where you go study. This is where you go get free textbooks. This is where you get free transcripts for finals. If you need a job, this is the plug right here. Like, it was pretty cool. And I find that that definitely helped and make a lot of community. And I try to do the same whenever other people from Richmond were considering going to Davis. So I really enjoyed my time there. And, it's not going to be easy. Definitely, it's always going to be like shenanigans that happens. Believe it was like my last year is when Trump got elected. And during that time period, even though we're in California and we're at like universities, there's still like stuff that was being written on walls and stuff that was being said. But I always felt like the community at Davis was very close because we knew who we were. The Latinos knew each other. So it made us stronger. And because of that, I had a wonderful time there, and I still keep in contact with a lot of people.
Thank you. Blanca?
Yeah, I'm just shortly to add, I don't know that I was necessarily looking for like Latino diversity as much as I was looking for like immigrant diversity. So like as an undocumented student going into college, like I was trying to find folks who identified in a similar way that I did. And so I went to community college first, and very similar to Beatriz, like I worked full time, and I went to school full time, and I took care of my brother, like in between the breaks, and so I needed to find somebody at campus that identified and understood where I was coming from. And the somebody was actually not even Latina, she was a Mexicana, she was Italian, she was Sicilian, we migrated to the US at the same age, like our parents didn't speak English, we would talk on the phone, when phone conversations still happened, and both of our parents would be yelling in the background in Italian and Spanish. And so it was like, that's what I was looking for, and when I went to Davis, I had a little bit more of an opportunity to become involved. I was a Chicano Studies major, so I wasn't necessarily looking, for a needle in the haystack, because everybody was there. But I've actually been involved. I danced son jarocho since I was a little girl, and son jarocho is traditional music from the state of Veracruz, Mexico. And so for me was I somehow found something there, and and made friends through that as well. And so that was my way of like not only looking for the immigrants, but also looking for something that made me feel close to something that I knew and understood that was important to me. And also at Davis, like I was looking for the immigrants, man. Like, we founded an undocumented student organization, and then that's who my support system was there. It was like immigrants from like Mexico, from Spain, from Philippines, so it was like, for me, the diversity was in what's our immigration status and what can we do to help each other.
Thank you. Okay, so for the upcoming questions, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick one person to answer that. And then if at the end we have some additional time, we can go back to those questions. So for this one, we have, what elements of the college experience feel unique to Latino first generation families? How might your experience differ from others, roommates, classmates, etc.? Myra, I'm gonna ask you to please answer this one.
I was talking a little bit about my experience around being a teen mom. And so it's very different. And because I shared that response, maybe what I'll say the question one more time, Israel.
What elements of the college experience feel unique to the Latino first generation families? And how might your experience differ from others?
So I think that what has been almost exactly the same is what all the panelists were talking about, the same conversations I have year after year with parents with the same questions. Why can't they go to this school that's right here in the neighborhood, Ray? Why do they have to go there? And the idea of holding students close to the family unit seems to be a common theme. And so I'm going to pass it off because I think that there's more expertise, personal life experience from the other panelists, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Who would like to take up the question now?
I could share a little bit that I was thinking about financial situation. I think a lot of our parents don't have a lot of financial education to determine that a savings should have occurred, that we should have planned for this maybe, because I think the idea of college for a lot of our immigrant parents and a lot of them who are Latino don't necessarily think about whether my son or daughter are going to go to college and do we need to plan ahead for this. And so for me, that was something that was very real. I kind of went to college and I was left to figure it out on my own. Like there was no financial support from my family. So everything like I had to figure out and I had to deal with. And so I think that's something that causes trauma because there's this idea of when you're going to college and you're having to not only think about what you're studying and that you need to study and that you need to complete your assignments, but you're also trying to figure out like, where am I going to get the money from, right? Am I even going to be able to graduate? And so to me, that was, I felt particularly as something that we don't think about as a Latino community, because we're so much more busy thinking about like, do we have enough money to pay for her quinceañera? Do we have enough money to like, go on that vacation to Mexico? Do we have enough money? But we're not thinking about what's actually important and what's going to lead to our futures.
Blanca, I think you're also touching on this next question. So I'm going to post it up here and so that everybody can see it. So how might a family's undocumented status impact routines and rituals of the college experience? This is definitely touching on that financial aspect too. So if you would like to share a little bit of your thoughts on this, and then I'll open the question for somebody else on the panel.
Sure. Again, I think it's also the trauma, right? Like we're thinking about as undocumented families, we also think about like, you know, if I go away to college, you know, far enough that I need to move, if anything happens, like immigration wise with my family, am I going to be there to offer support? Like, if like my parents get deported or if I get deported, and I think that's always in the back of our minds. And particularly if we don't have like a financial safety net, where what if our parents do end up deported, or what if we end up deported? Like, there's no financial safety net that's going to be able to alleviate the situation to get us into the next, you know, position, into the next day, into the next month. And so I predominantly say this not only as an immigrant, but as someone who works in the immigration field. Like, this is something that I see every single day. And so unfortunately, the trauma of being undocumented and being in college, like, or having immigrant families, it's hard. Like, I thought about going, you know, to grad school several times, like while still being undocumented, while, you know, while having DACA. And the thought of me like going back to school and understanding like, damn, this is still my status, like brought this trauma from my undergrad years that I was like, damn, I don't want to feel what I felt or what I had to go through. Like, I just want to be a student. Like, I just want to focus on what I'm studying. And so I think, I guess for a lot of that reason, I kind of put off going to graduate school for so long. And it's not until now that I'm thinking like, all right, dude, it's time. But again, right, like nobody ever thought about whether financially I was going to be ready to take on onto my bachelor's degree. My mom was extremely worried about whether she was going to have enough money to pay for my quinceañera. But that's kind of like where the savings went. And when it was time for me to go to college, they were like, pues si tú lo quieres hacer, arréglatelas como tú puedas. And so that kind of sucked.
Thank you. Anybody else from the panel that want to share some insights into this question?
I will keep it short. I think it's worth mentioning that with the Trump era, public charge has created a huge impact. Right now, I'm collaborating with the Undocumented Center and like figuring out info sessions for students in college right now that are paid of sometimes applying for some of these grants or paid volunteer assistance. And there's miscommunication that are like it's being bombarded to students, and a lot of this funding is going back to the state. And if it's not accesses, then students are like, you know, struggling to find help. And I think it's very important, one, get your information from a solid source, and especially when it comes to like immigration law and status, make sure to find a whether it's the center that connects you to a solid confirmed law office, but also going to subject experts. I think is very important because we all have different statuses. Not everyone has DACA. Some people are on like a U visa. Some people may be in different programs, and I think it's very important to know that even the immigrant undocumented experience is diverse, and it impacts your financial use.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next question. So we have, what are the trade-offs when choosing a college nearby versus one further away? Basically the pros and cons of this, right? So I'm going to open this one up to Carlos, and then we're going to go open it to the panel after.
Yeah, so there's always pros and cons to everything we do. That's the way I look at it. There's a lot of pros of being of choosing a school nearby, right? I mean, you have your family there, you're comfortable, you can know the area around there, you know the resources that you have. But there's also that sense of being able to go out there and experience something new, and being like your own person, right? Having to figure things out yourself. I think that's something we need to figure out and really keep in mind that, you know, like, we're not always going to have the support of our parents. Unfortunately, that's just how life goes. And I took that into accountability when I was choosing my school. You know, it's kind of far away, but it's also it's it's gotten me more mature, where I can make my own decisions. I have to figure things out myself. Sometimes I need to figure out how I'm gonna get gas money to go visit them, or where my next meal is gonna come from, right? But it really matures you. It shows you how to manage your time, how to manage your money, and it makes you your own person.
Thank you, Carlos. Anybody else want to add anything shortly? Thank you. So moving on to the next question. So this one revolves around college affordability. So let me put it in the chat. How do we debunk the myth about college costs? Private and out-of-state schools can actually be cheaper than in-state options. Also, how do we battle the fear of being in debt when financing college? Small savings in the short term may lead to a larger long-term cost. How do we prioritize best fit college choice to optimize the chance of graduation regardless of the cost? So now that's a loaded question, right? That's a big one. I think I'm going to open this one up if anybody wants to shed some light on this.
I'll take a stab at it. So one of the things that most people don't know is that the United States has over $1 trillion in loan debt, right, for education. $1 trillion. So there has to be a balance in the way we think about things. So the other fact that I learned when I went to grad school is that most white families take a second mortgage out to be able to afford to pay for their children's education. That's not something that most Latino families even discuss or think about. And so the second mortgage option is complicated, right? And people have to be privileged enough to be able to afford a first house, right? To be able to put a second mortgage on a house. So that's not an option for most people. So I do think that what Blanca said is actually the most fundamental piece, is that we have to make financial literacy part of our cultural experience. Many different cultures learn how to finance business, learn how to finance other aspects of their needs, and then eventually add on the education piece. And so we really do have to shift things for us. Right now, I have another grant from the Department of Ed that we just received, and one of the call outs from the Department of Ed to the federal government who's thinking about education, their number one priority was financial literacy, because this is not just a Latino problem, it's a United States problem. And so we all have to figure out how to deal with that. So I think financial literacy and embedding it early for our young students and having that be homework that parents have to do is really important. The last thing I'll say around this is, papas, taxes are important. Every year when we do FAFSA, they're like, what? I got to give somebody my taxes. So even those basic pieces, we need to embed in our system. And when students are in high school, we need to start preparing parents for that transition to college.
Thank you, Myra. And I think I'll add something really quickly on here. We are, this fear of being in debt has also stemmed out of this notion that there is good debt and there's bad debt. There's definitely expensive debt, credit cards and things like that. There's less expensive things. And so when you're looking at options, you should always consider, if you are going to be in debt, in some kind of debt, make sure that that is fitting with what you are actually spending, right? That fits with what you actually can make, that fits whatever you can pay. Seen people with credit card debt that don't want to take out a loan because they think they're going to be in more debt where you actually can refinance, right? So there are definitely a lot of financial orientation that people can get. Colleges offer it, so definitely look into that. And lastly, we have our question here. I'm going to post it in the chat. Because California is such a large state, there are cases when out-of-state college is actually closer to home than another college in California. How do we open conversations around college options without igniting the fear of children being too far away? And how do we ground college exploration in truth? And I'm gonna open this one up to the panel. So if anybody has Some thoughts on this?
I wanted to add a comment to the previous one and going into this question. I think a lot of the time, the idea of going to a further away college, like parents kind of see it as, well, if they go too far away, like, when am I going to see them? Like, are they going to be able to come back home for the holidays? Are they going to be able to come back home at every break? Is it going to be like, is it going to put a wider hole on my pocket kind of thing? And so it's not always the case. Like, you know, we've mentioned private universities, and so there's a difference between private universities and like public universities, which, for example, are like UC Davis, UC Berkeley. And so private universities a lot of the time offer scholarship opportunities, like better financial aid opportunities. And so, kind of to give you an example, there was recently like a news of a young student from Arizona who decided to actually attend Harvard because it was going to be a lot more affordable for this like DACA recipient to attend Harvard than it would have been for him to stay at Arizona State University. And so, you know, while yes, there is that like sentimiento of like my kid is going like to the other side of the country, we're also going back into the conversation of, well, financially speaking, he's making a good move, right? And also like education wise, like, come on, it's Harvard. Like, you know, like kid got accepted into Harvard. Why wouldn't he want to go? And so I think like sometimes choosing the closer or the further, or even if, you know, there's a university that's closer to like a California state line, but they offer better financial opportunities. Like, we also have to think about that. You know, again, like at some point our kids are going to leave, right? So why not have them leave for like the right reasons?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Oh, may I add one thing is liberal arts colleges are looking for diversity. They really are like craving it, and they're putting big dollars out there. They're not advertising the big dollars though. And they're not advertising it for particular populations either. What they're doing is quietly giving students that are diverse the money. And so I think the best option is to apply widely for students. And then after they've applied, when they receive the letters, begin to do the financial analysis and work with someone who can help you think about the long-term benefit of a loan. And so one of the calculations that I'll sit down and help students think about is, how much will you earn after the 4 years of college? So let's say you're going to be in debt $80,000, right? And then over the long term, once you get out, what's the median wage for you to earn and how much do you gain? Let's plot those dollars till you're 60. And then let's plot the dollars if you don't do that option, right? And over the long time, there's always a financial gain, but you may need many years to see that financial gain sometimes. And so it's the long-term planning and the financial eye that's important.
Thank you, Maya. And I want to thank all the panelists. If you have right now a closing statement, feel free to unmute yourself so that we can close out this part of the session. Thank you all for joining us today. I have appreciated the conversation and the opportunity to hear from all of your perspectives.